Welcome to a journey into one of the most disturbing and perplexing cases in the history of the Missouri Ozarks. The tall pines of the Ozark Mountains have witnessed countless stories, but few are as baffling as what happened in the winter of 1915. In a region where mist clings to the valleys and sunlight struggles to pierce the dense forest, the case of Clara Caldwell remains one of the most unsettling chapters in American history. On a bitter cold morning, December 18th, 1915, Sheriff Thomas Lawson was called to an isolated home in Shannon County, Missouri. Neighbors hadn't seen any activity from the Caldwell family for nearly 2 weeks. What the sheriff discovered would confound the scientific community for decades to come. 12-year-old Clara Caldwell was found alone in the family home. Her parents, Robert and Mary Caldwell, were nowhere to be found. The house was immaculate. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. The only things out of place were the hundreds of notebooks and drawings that surrounded Clara. They were filled with mathematical equations and scientific diagrams that experts would later describe as impossible for someone of her age and education to produce. This case is particularly unsettling, not just for the disappearance, but for the strange knowledge discovered in those notebooks. It's a case that challenges our understanding of human cognition and memory, the sudden acquisition of knowledge with no discernible source. Much of what we know about this case comes from fragmented sources, sheriff's reports, medical evaluations, and academic papers that were later sealed or reportedly destroyed. What remains are transcribed interviews, newspaper clippings, and the testimonies of those who encountered Clara in the years that followed. This is the documented account of Clara Caldwell, the girl whose mind became a vessel for knowledge no one could explain, and the terrible price that came with it. The Caldwell family arrived in Shannon County in the spring of 1913. Robert Caldwell, a former railroad engineer, had inherited a small property. By all accounts, the family was quiet but pleasant. They lived a simple life. Robert worked odd jobs, Mary sold quilts and preserves, and their only child, Clara, was described by her schoolteacher as shy but intelligent, with a knack for arithmetic. Nothing in their background suggested anything extraordinary. They had a basic education, and Clara attended the one-room schoolhouse in the nearby town of Eminence when the weather permitted the 7-mile journey. The last confirmed sighting of Robert and Mary Caldwell was on December 4th, 1915. Robert purchased supplies at Wilson's General Store. The shop owner, Elias Wilson, later told Sheriff Lawson that Robert seemed perfectly ordinary that day, maybe a bit preoccupied with the coming snow. He mentioned that Clara had been studying with unusual vigor and had requested more paper. For nearly 2 weeks, no one from the Caldwell family came to town. While this wasn't unusual during the winter, when the dirt roads were often impassable, neighbors grew concerned when smoke ceased rising from their chimney. On December 18th, Sheriff Lawson and neighbor Hiram Jenkins made the difficult journey to the Caldwell cabin. When they arrived, the cabin was silent. No smoke, no tracks in the snow, just a cold, still house. Sheriff Lawson found the front door unlocked, which was strange for such an isolated area. Inside, the house was cold but spotlessly clean. The wood stove was full of cold ash. A half-empty cup of tea on the table was frozen solid. There were no signs of a struggle or a hasty departure. Robert and Mary's belongings, clothing, a pocket watch, a silver brooch, were all still there. The beds were made as if no one had slept in them for days. It was in Clara's room that the most shocking discovery was made. The 12-year-old girl sat at a small desk by the window. She was alive but in a trance-like state. She didn't respond to the men and seemed to barely register their presence. Her room was the only warm space in the house, even though no fire was burning anywhere. The walls of her small bedroom were covered with diagrams, equations, and drawings, hundreds of them, some pinned up, others drawn directly onto the wooden walls. Her desk was littered with notebooks filled with complex formulas. Sheriff Lawson, who had only a basic education, knew these were not the scribblings of a typical girl from rural Missouri. Most disturbing of all were Clara's hands, stained with ink up to her wrists, as if she had been writing continuously for days. When the sheriff gently touched her shoulder, she slowly turned, her eyes focused with difficulty, and she spoke the words that would be recorded in his official report. "They're gone. They had to go. The numbers needed room." Sheriff Lawson immediately sent for the doctor. Dr. William Hayes arrived that evening and, in his medical report, described Clara as physically healthy but mentally altered. Her behavior was not normal. She exhibited a singular focus on mathematical and scientific notation beyond my ability to comprehend. When asked about her parents, she would only repeat, "They had to make room." Meanwhile, a search for Robert and Mary Caldwell turned up nothing. No footprints in the snow, no signs of violence. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. Word of the strange case quickly spread. Professor James Morgan from the University of Missouri arrived in eminence, a mathematician with an interest in prodigies. He was initially skeptical, but his skepticism vanished upon meeting Clara. In a letter to his department chair, he wrote, "What I witnessed today defies rational explanation. The child, with no access to advanced education or materials, is producing work that would challenge our most accomplished graduate students." Professor Morgan took several pages of Clara's notebooks back to the university. Experts in various scientific fields confirmed that the work was not only legitimate, but contained several novel approaches to existing problems in physics and mathematics. When questioned directly by Professor Morgan about her knowledge, Clara responded with unnerving simplicity. "I went to sleep, and when I woke up, the numbers were there. They're so loud now, they needed more room." By early 1916, Clara's case had attracted attention from across the Midwest. On January 12th, she was transferred to Missouri State Hospital No. 4 in Farmington for a more comprehensive evaluation. At the hospital, Clara was placed under the direct supervision of Dr. Eleanor Reed, one of the few female psychiatrists practicing in Missouri at the time. Dr. Reed's detailed case notes provide the most comprehensive documentation of Clara's condition. She wrote that Clara had extraordinary cognitive abilities in specific domains, with no prior training or exposure. In a particularly revealing session from February 1916, Dr. Reed pressed Clara about her knowledge. Clara responded, "The sky opened. Not for everyone, just for me. It poured in like water. It was heavy, like honey, but sharper. They tried to make it stop. But it kept coming, and there wasn't enough room for all of us." Dr. Reed's notes following this session indicate her growing concern. She believed Clara was describing a form of psychotic break, but her cognitive functions remained perfectly intact. Most disturbing was Clara's continued implication that her parents' disappearance was somehow connected to her sudden acquisition of knowledge. By April 1916, Clara's case had attracted national press attention. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch ran a front-page story titled, "Missouri's Miracle Child, the Girl Who Knows Too Much." This publicity brought unwelcome attention to the hospital, including from two men who identified themselves as representatives from the Department of War. No transcript of this meeting exists in public records. Shortly after this visit, Clara's condition began to deteriorate. She complained of severe headaches and began having nosebleeds. Her physical health declined rapidly. Her sleep became erratic, with nurses reporting that she would sometimes stay awake for 50 or 60 hours, writing continuously, then collapse into a deep, long sleep. Her body temperature would drop to dangerously low levels. Dr. Reed began to consider a disturbing possibility that whatever knowledge or ability had manifested in Clara might be physically consuming her. She wrote, "It's as if her mind is a vessel for something too vast for her physical form to contain." In September 1916, an unexpected change came. A woman arrived at the hospital claiming to be Elizabeth Caldwell, Robert Caldwell's sister, from Illinois. She presented documentation confirming her identity and relationship to Clara. Elizabeth told Dr. Reed that the Caldwell family had a history of what she called episodes, where family members exhibited sudden, inexplicable knowledge. She claimed 3 of her siblings had died after displaying similar symptoms, and that Clara's parents had fled to the Ozarks to protect her should this happen. Within days, arrangements were made for Clara to be released into her aunt's custody. Professor Morgan strongly objected, but his concerns were overruled. On September 12, 1916, Clara Caldwell left Missouri State Hospital No. 4 with Elizabeth. What happened next has been pieced together from fragmented sources. Professor Morgan, concerned about Clara's well-being, launched his own investigation in 1920. He discovered a disturbing conclusion. The address in Springfield, Illinois, where Elizabeth claimed to have taken Clara, did not exist. The doctor she had mentioned was not registered with any medical association. Most troublingly, Morgan found no record of Robert Caldwell having a sister named Elizabeth. Whoever had taken Clara from the hospital had created an elaborate fiction. Clara Caldwell, the mysterious child whose mind had accessed knowledge beyond her years, had vanished from record as completely as her parents had vanished from their cabin in the Ozarks. The case of the Caldwell family remains open in the dusty archives of Shannon County to this day. There were no bodies, no clues, and no explanation for the knowledge Clara gained or the price it ultimately cost her. We are left only with her cryptic words, "They had to make room."